Here's a half a dozen plants that I just didn't know where to put anywhere else. So I just stuck them together at the end and called them oddball plants. There's nothing odd about them. They're just plants that didn't fit in a group with anybody else really well, like fireweed. Beautiful plant, an important plant, one of the first colonizers in the forest after a fire. So they grow these tall, straight stems with lots of long, almost willow-like leaves coming out from all sides. And at the top, they have these beautiful flowers with big pinkish petals, just four of them, which is a little bit unusual. And those get pollinated, and their capsules, these guys up here in the upper right, when they dry, the sides curl back and they release these fluffy seeds. You can see all this fluff ready to just drift off on the breeze and go find a new area of a burned forest to colonize. Once the forest starts growing back and it starts getting shaded out, these guys get unhealthy, diseased, and then they just kind of disappear until the next fire comes around. And you're probably familiar with some other members of this group, the evening primrose family. They have really similar looking flowers, but here's one of them that I find particularly common to see, an important member of the forest. There are a variety of violets, a pretty common plant, especially in meadows and moist areas. But then there's this one, the sagebrush violet. Grows in a really harsh, dry environment. Unlike most violets have simple leaves. This one's really compound in kind of a strange way. They're dissected up, as you can see in all these photos, but not in kind of a traditional type of way. And what I like about this plant is, one, it grows in this harsh environment and has these beautiful petals. Notice how variable they are. So this one over here on the left has this deep purple petal and then more violet ones and then some different coloration in the middle, whereas this one on the right is deep, deep purple and then white, and then same yellow in the middle. And they're all trying to attract pollinators to the middle here so they get pollen on them, and they attract them with these little spurs out the back that have nectar in them that the pollinators come and try to find. Part of their secret to surviving in a harsh environment is their leaves are pretty stout for a violet, but they also just come up in the spring when the weather's mild and pleasant. They flower, they set seed, and then they pretty much fade away and just wait out the rest of the summer, fall, and winter as a perennial rootstock. So sagebrush violet, another kind of plant that doesn't fit with a lot of others, but sure is a nice one to know, and definitely worth just sitting down in the rocks and taking a closer look at. It really is that beautiful. Buckwheats are one that are hard to escape. Anywhere you go, you're probably going to find buckwheats, especially if you're somewhere with kind of rocky soils. They just kind of grow everywhere. They're a really diverse group. You know, I could have sworn there's 80 of them, but the Burke Museum that keeps track of the plants of Washington State, they only list 20 species, so maybe there's not quite as much confusion as I thought. But if you see a small shrub, and they're all just tiny shrubs, this one is about as big as they get, and it's just maybe a little taller than your knee, but some like this guy right up here only get up to the top of your shoes, so pretty small plants. But if you have that shrubby leaves, really woolly leaves, so usually lots of fuzz on them, especially underneath. Usually the underside of the leaves just covered with wool, which actually gives them their name. Aereo means woolly. And then lastly, if they have this little ball of flowers, so kind of like a head, really tight cluster of flowers. In each of those, although it's hard to see, the tiny flowers have 6 petals on each of their flowers. A bit of an unusual arrangement for a dicot. We've seen it a couple of times, but not really commonly. Flowers usually range from cream to yellow, often tinged with a little bit of pink, especially like you see in this one here. I'm not just going to try to go into the different species. Honestly, haven't learned them well enough yet to be able to go there. But as a group, they're really pretty easy to identify. And like I said, you're likely to run into them just about anywhere you go in central Washington. So there are quite a few members of the currant or gooseberry family. And this one is a really pleasant one, the wax currant. You'll find this growing very often in canyons of the Columbia Plateau here in central Washington. It has these rounded leaves with lots of sort of scalloped edges on them. They don't have any thorns, which is really nice. A lot of gooseberries and currants do. And they're a shrubby plant. You can see the woody stems over here on the right. They grow up usually around head high. If they're healthy, taller. If they're not quite as healthy, a little shorter. They have these tubular white flowers that mature into these red berries that I find very pleasant to eat. Not everybody agrees with how pleasant they are, but I find them actually fairly nice. So an unarmed plant that you can eat some nice berries, I mean, what could be better than that? And it's beautiful. So there's the wax currant. Well, the Indian paintbrush has got to be the envy of pretty much every gardener. I mean, a stand of these would just look beautiful out in your flower garden, but they just don't grow there. You have to enjoy these out in the wild. And part of the reason for that is that they are a partially parasitic plant. They actually tap in with their roots to other plant roots and steal their nutrients. I know, it sounds kind of mean. They do still have their green leaves and they do photosynthesis, but they get some help from their neighbors. There's a lot of different ones to enjoy, and they range in colors, as you can see here. Interestingly, what you see is this colorful floral display is mostly actually the leafy bract below the flower itself. The flower is really kind of small and plain, so that's just the leafy bract, but still, what a joy to behold. And you'll find these in all kinds of different habitats and places. So there's the Indian paintbrush. Another almost total parasite is mistletoe. And we just have these in Washington State growing on our conifer species. So there's different species, each of them growing on a different conifer. So here in this middle picture, we see one growing on larch. And over on the left here, we see it growing on ponderosa pine. And you can see a smaller cluster on the right here and how this stem sort of swells up. These have sticky berries stick to the plant stems, and then they send their roots down into the stem of the plant to draw out all those nutrients. They do a little bit of their own photosynthesis, but largely just operate as a parasite on that plant. They don't do a ton of damage unless the plant itself gets unhealthy for other reasons, and then it really does start to take its toll on the plant. And they are a flowering plant, so these right here you see are in flower. Then they'll produce these small berries that, like I said, are kind of sticky and actually have explosive seed capsules and shoot out their seeds elsewhere to land somewhere else on a stem and grow a new little parasitic mistletoe plant there as well. So mistletoe, you got to search kind of hard for it. It doesn't just stand right out to you, but when you see a weird growth up in a conifer tree, there's a good chance that there's mistletoe there. Well, that's it for this oddball group of plants. I hope you get to find them next time you're out and about. Until next time, happy botanizing.